Hello and welcome back. Something that has astounded me with so many people I speak to who are trying to change their relationship with alcohol is how many of us struggle with this pattern of overfunctioning, actually overdoing, not being able to switch off. And what strikes me is that for so many of us in this space, the issue isn't that we can't cope, it's that we cope too much. We do too much, we carry too much, and we just can't stop. I can absolutely relate to this in my own life. I always prided myself on being super independent. I got my first job at 13, packed groceries at a local supermarket, and I really haven't stopped working since. I loved having my own money, my own freedom, not needing anything from anyone. Then I had kids and a family, and the to do list just took over my life. There was this unspoken, unconscious standard I was reaching for, this invisible expectation of what a good mum looks like, how my body should look, how my house should look, how I should be able to parent and still thrive in my career. This invisible bar of perfect, which in my mind was actually the bar of just good enough. And reaching for it kept me relentlessly busy. Meals, cleaning, washing, tidying, baby who wouldn't sleep. I had no idea what I was doing, so I did what I always do. I tried everything, read everything, learned everything, which led to a whole new level of overwhelm. And then as the kids got older, the list doesn't shrink, homework and housework and my own work and self-care and exercise and trying to balance friendships and family. It's just the never-ending task of just keeping it all going. No wonder alcohol felt like a release valve, just something to switch all of that off for a minute. But as I've gotten more curious about these tendencies, this pattern of keep going until I burn out, I realized something important. A lot of the time, when we're motivated to keep going, it isn't coming from a place of love or service, it's coming from guilt. That's what a good mum should do. I should take care of myself. I should go for a walk now. I should call this family member once a week. My house should look a certain way. Or from fear, if I don't do this, they'll never learn. If I stop, it will all fall apart. And here's the trouble with that, friend. When our motivation comes from guilt and fear, the end result is very often resentment. And as Christians, the heart of our motivation matters enormously to God. 1 Corinthians 16, verse 14 says, "Do everything in love." I heard someone say that a healthy boundary is the place where I can love you and me at the same time. And that made me think of the great commandment: love the Lord your God with all your heart, all your strength, and all of your soul, and love your neighbor as yourself. Gosh, but we often forget the yourself bit, don't we? When we act out of guilt and fear, we're not loving ourselves in that moment. We're not truly loving the other person, and we're not loving or trusting God. So, let me dive into a practical tool for getting curious about what's actually driving your behavior if this resonates. First, a quick distinction between the two emotions because of guilt and resentment, because they often get confused. Guilt is the thing that surfaces when we feel we've let someone down or that our behavior is negatively impacting another person. But here's what's important to understand: a lot of the guilt that we carry is conditioned guilt. It's like a false guilt because we're not actually doing anything wrong. We've simply been shaped by our upbringing, by patterns in relationships, by culture, even, to believe there's a certain way we should be doing things. And when we don't meet that standard, guilt shows up. Then there's resentment, on the other hand. This is what surfaces when we consistently are prioritizing other people's wants and needs and expectations above our own. And over time, that builds into frustration, anger, and emotional exhaustion. Resentment is the ultimate relationship destroyer. It is literally the opposite of love, and it tends to grow quietly in the background until one day it's not so quiet anymore. When we consistently let guilt drive our actions, that is where resentment takes root. The devil would love to keep you moving on the basis of false guilt because, in the end, it will destroy the relationships that matter most. God, on the other hand, implores us to let our motivation be love. That will sometimes mean saying no, filling our own tanks first, spending time with Him, resting. Love your neighbor, yes, but love yourself first. You cannot give from an empty cup. Here's something that I want you to be prepared for. When we start to shift old patterns, when we start saying no to things that have in the past been driven by this false guilt, that guilty feeling doesn't immediately disappear. It sort of lingers. It feels uncomfortable. It can feel like we are doing something wrong, even when we're not. In those moments, choose guilt over resentment. Sit with the discomfort of the guilt and prayerfully ask God, am I really doing something wrong here? Or am I just being driven by unrealistic expectations? Ask Him to shed His light on what actually needs to be done in your day. Ask Him to show you what love really requires in this moment, because it may be much less than you think. Over time, as you live more in alignment with what's actually true, the guilt will begin to recede. It won't always feel this uncomfortable, but you have to be willing to sit with it for a while first. Here are a couple of practical steps to help you integrate this. Step one, identify your emotional triggers. Start by just noticing the situations where you experience guilt or resentment. Where do these feelings show up for you? What are the thoughts that you have in those moments? Often you'll find they're linked to prioritizing other people's needs, trying to meet expectations, or consistently neglecting your own. Step two, explore the underlying beliefs. Ask yourself, what expectation am I trying to meet? And what am I afraid might happen if I don't? What will I make it mean if I stop doing this? Guilt often comes from a sense of duty or obligation, and resentment is often rooted in a fear of conflict, a desire for approval, or people pleasing tendencies. Getting curious about what's underneath is where the real insight lives. Step four, reframe and set boundaries. Once you have awareness, you can start to make different choices. Prioritize self-care, communicate more honestly, set boundaries that actually reflect what works for you. The goal is not to set boundaries from a place of guilt or resentment, but from a place of self-awareness and self-respect. Not because you're angry, not because you feel guilty, but because you know what you need and you're choosing to honor that. And finally, step five, bring compassion to yourself in all of this. It's no use giving care to others while you neglect yourself. It's just not sustainable, and it's not what God asks of us. Martin Luther wrote, I have so much to do today that I shall spend the first 3 hours in prayer. I'm not saying that's what you should do, but it just brings the point home that for most of us, our work is simply resting and trusting in God, especially in the days and the times of our life when we have so much on. Accept your limits, do what you can with love, and pray fervently to the God who has everything else in His hands. Because healthy boundaries don't make you less loving, they make you more so. When you release resentment and navigate guilt with greater awareness, you become more able to show up for the people in your life with genuine love, not obligation or fear, just love. Remember 1 Corinthians 16, verse 14, do everything in love. That's the invitation, and that is the guilt versus resentment tactic.